Hello, I'm Dottie Kay. Welcome to the second program on the law and local government. This series is presented as a public service, sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Upper St. Clair and Mr. Robert Hackett, attorney at law. The format consists of a lecture and general summary of each topic by Mr. Hackett, and League members will lead the discussion on that particular subject. Last time, we looked at the home rule system of government, and today we continue with the presentation on separation of powers. Although the programs are taped, the discussion is unrehearsed and spontaneous. Here now, to present the background information, is Mr. Robert Hackett, the township's attorney since 1975. He has resided in this community since 1960. Mr. Hackett has offices in Upper St. Clair and is associated with Strasburger McKinner Law Office in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Today we're going to talk about the separation of powers in the government of Upper St. Clair. You know that the United States has the traditional separation of powers that the Constitution provided. We know that the United States has Congress, the executive, and the judicial branches of the federal government. You also probably know that the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has basically the same separation of powers in the government. But did you know that Upper St. Clair, with its charter, has provided for similar checks and balances for the local government? Let us take a look at the grant of powers which was provided in the charter and in the legislative laws of the Township of Upper St. Clair. First, Section 301 of the Charter clearly provides that the legislative powers are vested in the elected Board of Commissioners of the Township. That follows the same tradition as the state legislature or the Congress of the United States, for it is the Board of Commissioners that enacts the legislative laws of the township and is elected by the people and therefore is the servant of the people. In addition to the Board of Commissioners, we have, though, in the Township Charter, a separation of powers in that Section 602 of the Charter states that the Township Manager shall be the Chief Administrative Officer of the Township. Although the Township Manager is not elected, as is the President of the United States or the Governor of the state of Pennsylvania, the Township Manager is the Chief Administrative Officer, and it is only the Township Manager who has the authority to talk to and to order the other administrative officers and employees of the township. In addition to the Township Manager, we have 2 or 3 other areas of local government that act as checks and balances on each other. One is the Township Attorney. Under Section 701 of the Township Charter, the township attorney is appointed by the Board of Commissioners, not by the manager. This was done because the township attorney is in essence advising the township as an entity. The township attorney is not the township manager's attorney. He does not represent the township manager, although he often works closely with the township manager and obviously has a very close working relationship. The township attorney, though, really works for the township legislative body, the Board of Commissioners, and thus the entity of the township. And the township attorney's advice goes to the commissioners. In addition to the township attorney, we have the administrative code enacted by the Board of Commissioners, which sets up the different appointed boards and commissions of the township. This is not derived from the charter, but is an administrative law enacted by the Board of Commissioners. And as we will see, with few exceptions, the administrative code provides for boards and commissions at the commissioner's will. That is, they can abolish the boards and the commissions with a few exceptions, which we will talk about in just a second. In addition to the township attorney, the township manager, and the boards of commissions, we have another officer appointed by the township commissioners, the township engineer, who is a person or entity that advises the township on engineering problems. Now, let us look at how the interplay revolves around the separation of powers in this local government, much as it does in the federal government and the state. Here is a general outline to give you a review of how the township government in Upper St. Clair is organized and why there is a built-in system of checks and balances. Of course, the voters again elect the Board of Commissioners, and the Board of Commissioners appoint the township engineer, the township attorney, and the township manager. In addition to that, the township manager, through legislation of the Board of Commissioners, appoints all of the employees in the township departments. Those employees include a director of planning and community development, a director of public works, a director of parks and recreation, an assistant to the manager who heads the administration department, the police protection department headed by a chief of police, the library department, and we'll have more on that later, and in addition, one I forgot, the director of public finance, what we used to call the tax collector. All of those departments are appointed positions, and those appointed positions are done by the township manager. Now, the township manager can ask the commissioners whether the commissioners like a particular department head, but the township manager doesn't have to. The township manager can do it on his own. Of course, as you know, if the commissioners do not approve of the township manager can be removed by the commissioners. These departments then assist the township manager in the administrative overall control of the township. And in our future programs, we'll talk a little bit more about public finance and the debt financing of the township. It's interesting now to look at the citizen participation in the township government. And to do that, we're going to examine the citizen participation in the various boards and commissions of the government. First, we have two of these boards and commissions which the township commissioners must use even if they didn't want to. And why is that? If you will remember in our last program, we talked about the limitations that the state government has on a home rule municipality. One of those limitations is in the area of zoning and planning. That area is governed by what we call in Pennsylvania the Municipalities Planning Code. And under the Municipalities Planning Code, every municipality, except for Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, must have a planning commission and a zoning hearing board. We will not talk today about the exact functions of zoning in those two boards, but we will in general tell you what the zoning hearing board does and what the planning commission does. The zoning hearing board is again appointed by the commissioners, 3 members, and the zoning hearing board acts as a quasi-judicial body. That is, the zoning hearing board, as the word hearing states, holds judicial hearings to determine whether or not various interpretations are legal under the zoning ordinance, whether variances should be granted under the zoning ordinance, and in so doing, the zoning hearing board acts as an independent agency. That is, the Board of Commissioners has no authority to tell the zoning hearing board how to make its decisions. The Board of Commissioners can appoint the zoning hearing board, much as the President of the United States can appoint the Supreme Court. But once you appoint me, I don't have to vote the way you want me to vote, you know. I can vote the way I want to. And that's what the zoning hearing board can do. The Planning Commission, again, the Planning Commission is mandated by the Municipalities Planning Code. And the Planning Commission is in essence analyzes the various zoning problems to come before the Board of Commissioners. And as you know, zoning and planning are the 2 areas of most citizen concern in Upper St. Clair. Therefore, the Planning Commission acts as a fact-finding body and makes recommendations to the Board of Commissioners. Again, once the Board of Commissioners appoints the Planning Commission, it can remove the Planning Commission members, but it can't tell the Planning Commission members how to vote. And the Planning Commission members work closely with the Department of Community Planning and Development in the township, and they make voted recommendations to the Board of Commissioners as to what property should be rezoned, as to how conditional uses should be granted, as to how, in general, the administrative body of the township should review and recommend to the commissioners. In addition, the Planning Commission has been working on in the last year or 2 in revising the comprehensive plan for the township. All of these functions are within the Planning Commission, and the Planning Commission is a body which you must have under the Municipalities Planning Code. In addition to the boards mandated by the zoning laws of the state, we had in Upper St. Clair for some time another board mandated by the state, the Library Board. The background of the Library Board was that in the 50s and 60s, they wanted to encourage library funding by local governments so that the citizens of the local governments would benefit from the use of a library. In order to do this, the state did not want to have the local governments take the money given to the local governments from the state for library purposes and have those local governments use the money, for instance, to build roads or build a building. They wanted to make sure that each local government had a library board and would use the monies from the state for library purposes, in fact, to buy books or to maintain the library. Thus, there was passed in Pennsylvania a state library code. Upper St. Clair established its library board before it was a home rule community, and that library board at the time functioned independently as a library executive branch to manage the library. When Upper St. Clair became a home rule municipality in 1976, there was questions whether or not a home rule municipality had to have a library board. And at that time, the system wasn't changed. Later, we found out, because of various opinions issued by the Attorney General's office and the Department of Community Affairs, that in fact a home rule community did not have to have a separate library board as long as the monies given by the state and matched by the local government went to serve the library. Thus, it became an additional administrative burden on the township to have an independent library board. It transgressed and was against the general philosophy of the home rule strong manager government. Therefore, the library board in 1985 has become a true advisory board rather than an administrative board, and the library department is now a full department of the township, managed by the professional manager and treated like every other department. Thus, the library board, unlike the zoning hearing board and the planning commission, does not have to be separately established under a state law. Rather, it is established under the home rule charter and is now an advisory board. An advisory board can only advise the commissioners or the administration, the township manager. We have many other advisory boards. We have, for instance, the Parks and Recreation Board, which is an advisory board. We have the Cable TV Commission, which is an advisory board. We have the Traffic Safety Board, which is an advisory board. We have also the Building and Fire Code Board and the Civil Service Board. These boards, although not mandated as clearly under state law as the Zoning Hearing Board and the Planning Commission, these boards are in essence somewhat in between strict advisory boards and mandated state boards. These boards function in very specific areas. That is, the Buildings and Fire Code Board acts as an appeal board under our fire code and our building code. For example, if you want to come in and build a townhouse and the building code says that you have to have a concrete wall, but there's a new product that's just as good as concrete, you can appeal to the Building and Fire Code Board and show them that the new product is just as good as concrete but less expensive, and therefore you ought to be able to use a new product. That's what the Building and Fire Code Board does. It hears appeals from the code enforced by the building code's officers and decides those issues. The Civil Service Board is the board which interprets and holds hearings on civil service matters. In our township, we have civil service rights which belong in general to the police. If a police person is disciplined, suspended, removed, or reprimanded, and the police person wishes to appeal that and have a hearing on it, it goes to the Civil Service Board. And that's really the only function of the Civil Service Board. But again, the Civil Service Board is independent from the Board of Commissioners or the manager, because you can't tell the Civil Service Board how to vote, nor can you tell the Building and Fire Code people how to vote. Therefore, we again have the same idea of the checks and balances in the local system of government that we do in the United States government or in the state government. These checks and balances, however, in the local government have one big difference. In the local government, except for the township manager and the employees and the township attorney and the township engineer, all of these people are volunteers. And those people who are volunteers spend endless hours on these boards for the service of the community. The Board of Commissioners, although they are paid a very minimum $100 a month, in essence are volunteers. So therefore, you can see, to maintain this fairly large administrative scheme in Upper St. Clair Township, it takes an enormous amount of organization and a tremendous amount of time from the citizens of the township to make this system of local government mesh. In closing, it is a unique system of checks and balances which we have at our local level, patterned after the federal system and the state system, but unique to local government because of our Home Rule Charter system of checks and balances.
Thank you, Bob. Very interesting. On my left today from the League of Women Voters is Pat Hyde. Bob, I keep hearing the phrase check and balance. Would you define that for us, please?
Yes, check and balance, or checks and balances, are terms that were really derived from a description of the United States Constitution and were part of the structure of the federal government that our forefathers imposed in order to make sure that the different parts of government responded to each other. For example, the Supreme Court of the United States interprets the Constitution of the United States. It does that because if Congress would pass a law that's unconstitutional, the Supreme Court is able to override that law and state if it's constitutional or not. On the other hand, the President is able to veto legislation passed by Congress unless Congress has the requisite 2/3 or whatever is required to pass the legislation. And in that way, the President checks the Congress. And that is what the term checks and balances mean.
Well, how did you find that locally?
Well, if you'd apply that locally, you would use the checks and balances system to analyze the charter. And for example, as we talked about in the previous program on the charter, the charter provides that we have a strong management system. It, in essence, does not allow the legislator, which is our governing body, or 7 commissioners, to interfere with the management of the township. However, the manager is hired and fired by the commissioners. So although they cannot task manage and supplement or go over the manager every day's task in running the township, they can replace the manager at their will. And that's a check and balance in that way. It's the same thing on the boards. Pat Hyde here, who is on the Planning Commission, is appointed by the commissioners. But they can't tell Pat how to vote. That's up to Pat. So that's a check and balance.
I'll take you up on that point. That's true. They can't tell me how to vote. They can't tell any of the members of the boards or commissions how to vote. And I can only speak from experience in the Planning Commission because we do forward our recommendations by vote. There's nothing that requires the Board of Commissioners to honor our votes either. There have been times that we recommend one thing and they go ahead and decide that that is not in the best interest in the township and vote against it. Now in, I think it's Bethel Park, for instance, requires that if to overturn a planning commission vote, they must have, I suppose it's a 2/3 majority. It's something better than a simple majority anyway. We don't have that here. So although they can't tell you how to vote, that doesn't necessarily mean they're following the recommendation. There are other things they have to consider. I guess a point I'd like to discuss more than that, because I have a problem with the Board of Commissioners as being the legislative body. They do, in fact, enact the laws. But it is the township manager and his staff that write the laws. So I really wonder about the need for the commissioners then. Are they a rubber stamp for the manager? We have a strong manager, and we support that. But are they just a rubber stamp of his wishes?
No, I think the ultimate authority is with the governing body, as it is in any government, in federal or state. I think the ultimate authority always derives from the elected governing body, and therefore the ultimate authority is with the people, and that's as it should be. However, under the charter form of government here in Upper St. Clair, they are trying to keep the governing body addressed to the conceptual philosophy of governing, not to what I call task management. And to say that because the attorney, myself, or the manager writes a bill doesn't mean that the governing body can't refuse to pass the bill or revise the bill. And they do many times. So I think that they are anything but a rubber stamp in governing, but they are supposed to be, quote, a rubber stamp in the everyday task management.
Yes.
And they are by the charter.
Mm-hmm. Several times I have heard some of the commissioners say, gosh, I wish I had a staff. I think they found that they do not, they certainly adhere to that, not directing the staff other than through the manager, asking for a report on a survey of a certain road or a sewer system or something like that. But some of the nitty-gritty detail work, these people are all busy people. They have jobs and active in many other things, so obviously they're volunteers and their time is limited. And they have made that comment. I wish there was a staff. We had a staff that did some independent research and things like that, so we got another opinion. How do you see that? Is that possible? Is that bigger government? What is your
I don't believe that it's possible under our charter. And the reason that I don't believe our charter is meant to have that is because the staff for elected officials, such as the Congress people of the United States or the legislators of the state, have a staff because the executive branch is elected. That is, the governor is elected and the president is elected. The legislators cannot fire Ronald Reagan if they want to. On the other hand, in the local government, the commissioners may, without cause, fire the manager anytime they want to. So the whole structure is of a different look, a different flavor, because the commissioners can have the staff or the manager rewrite anything they want to, and they have total control. I'd like to comment for a minute, though, on your other point. It's one of the very, very strong points in Upper St. Clair, and it's, in my opinion, a very strong reason for the, quote, strong manager government that we have. The most dangerous thing to me in local government is that the meetings and the bureaucracy take so much time that it eliminates the successful businessman from being, or person, from being on the legislature. That is, if you take so much time nitpicking the tasks of government, no successful person can afford to spend that much time. Therefore, I think it was very wise of the forefathers of the Charter to allow the professional hired people to take care of the everyday tasks in government and to make the legislators focus on the concepts and philosophy of government. If you didn't do that, your meetings would last 10 hours instead of 2 hours. And no successful person could be on government. And it's happened all through Allegheny County. Allegheny County has about 130 municipalities. And in many of those municipalities, all they have as legislators are people who are retired or, quite frankly, were unsuccessful and have nothing else to do. And therefore, you don't get the cream of the crop governing. Whereas in Upper St. Clair, we've been very lucky in having successful people be on as a commissioner or as an elected legislator, as you should call them. And I think it's really part of this book, the charter, that allows that to happen.
Bob, I have a question. When I heard you say the commissioners can have the power to fire the township manager, which I realize, but what bothers me, isn't that a drastic measure to just, you don't like the way something's going, to just fire a person, and then you have to hire somebody, get somebody that has to come in and learn the ropes all over again. You have to get used to working with them. Isn't there a better way to handle it other than just fire? Well,
I think that the mechanism of having the legislators control the manager is an inevitable result of strong manager government, because if you did not have the final control in the electors, you would, in essence, violate the charter, and I think you would destroy the efficiency of the local government. Now, it is true that in the 10 years that they've had the charter form of government, they have never fired a manager. They've had differences, and they've exchanged strong words, I'm sure, but they never have really had that happen. But I think it is essential that the power to fire and hire remain in the governing body, and that is very important because it does separate the powers. Mm-hmm. And just as it's very important to get back that they can't have a commissioner corner a supervisor or a foreman or a worker in the works division and say, what are you doing today? I don't want you to take this bush out, I want you to take that bush out. That's not permitted. And I think that's exceptionally good.
I know you said that, Bob, it wasn't permitted, but are the commissioners allowed to, when I say talk with the employees, I don't mean ordering them, do this or do that, but can they go to, say, the chief of police or the head of the library board or anyone else in that capacity and say, how are things going? Are things working out well? Do you have any problems? And if they did, then they would go to the township manager and sit down and converse with him. Are they allowed to do that?
Well, you're referring to sections 308 and 309 of the charter, and I believe in those sections, which are relatively short, it speaks for itself. And I'll read 308 for you. We read it before, but it has a great deal to do with the separation of powers. All commissioner authority shall be asserted only by the Board of Commissioners. No individual commissioner shall have any authority whatsoever under this charter unless such authority is specifically delegated by the charter or the Board of Commissioners acting as a body. Which means that human beings being what they are, you're not going to have a commissioner walk by the chief of police and not say, how are things going, chief? And I'm sure the chief is going to talk to the commissioner, and I'm sure the charter didn't mean to stop that. But it's very clear here that that commissioner has no right to tell the chief to do anything.
Oh, no. That I understand.
Right. Mm-hmm. And I think the communications are all right, But we then have 309C, which is entitled Interference with Administration. Except for the purpose of formal inquiries and investigation, the Board of Commissioners or its members shall deal with the township officers and employees who are subject to the direction and supervision of the manager solely through the manager. And neither the Board of Commissioners nor its members shall give orders to any such officer or employee either publicly or privately. That's pretty strong.
Yes, it is.
There aren't many charters that have language that strong that really lays that out for you. You can't misconstrue that.
I think, though, sometimes in trying to follow a line very precisely, it sometimes the elected officials, the Board of Commissioners, shut themselves out from some additional forms of information because they do try not to talk to employees, or by the same token, employees who reside within the township sometimes become disenfranchised if they can't feel they can speak to their elected official. You know, there's a fine line there, and it sometimes can create problems.
Yes, I think you would find that the opposite situation would create more problems, but I agree with you, Pat. There is a fine line, and certainly all the citizens of the township have a right to speak directly to their elected officials.
Right.
And that's really what they were trying to do. They were trying to say, you know, let the citizens talk to the commissioners. Let the employees talk to the manager. And let the manager and the commissioners talk to each other.
I think to go on a little bit further, as far as something in the charter that that I think was a good point, dealing with the township manager making the requirement that he live in the township. Because it's the day-to-day living in the township that tells so much about the quality of life. And I've heard people say, well, I talked to the manager at the opening of nursery school or the program, or I did see the commissioner at the baseball field, or at the swimming meet we talked to. These are the communications that are very important. Obviously, the commissioners must reside in the township and in their ward, but I also think that's a good point of having the manager.
Yes, I like that part of the charter. I think it's good to have the manager as part of the community.
Mm-hmm. I think then he has a real interest in the community, not just because he's been hired by the community, but he lives here, he's paying taxes here. This community is part of where his family lives and where their children are going to be educated and so forth. So it does make sense.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to speak a little bit, again, you mentioned being on the Planning Commission, and we have an excellent staff that supports the Planning Commission. We've had, and the Director of Community Development was just hired under the Home Rule Charter, that is after it went into effect and so forth, and it was certainly an improvement over the kinds of things we had before. There is a professional in there and doing the job and advising our board. Now, I think all of the boards, in talking about them being advisory, they are supported by township staff. How does that relate? I can speak for the Planning Commission. Our material is transcribed and forwarded through the manager to the Board of Commissioners. I do know in some of the other boards, I've talked to members of them saying that they weren't sure how their material, some of them have formal minutes, others don't. Can you talk about that a little bit? What is the feedback, how the feedback from those various advisory boards gets to the Board of Commissioners?
Well, most, if not all, of the advisory boards, including for sure the Zoning Hearing Board and the Planning Commission, have staff, quote, secretaries, which in essence transcribe the minutes of the meetings and transcribe the actions by the boards, and where necessary make verbatim transcripts. However, the staff support is in addition to the quote secretaries supplied to the boards by the staff, so that you have professional backup. Now, the communication should be authorized and reviewed by the boards. That is, the staff who prepares the minutes submits the minutes under Robert's Rules of Order or whatever rules there's generally used, and the body approves those minutes. Now, if the minutes don't reflect what happened or the board's outlook or the board's actions, it's up to the board to change those minutes, and those minutes are then transmitted to the commissioners. There should be no editing by the staff on what's transcribed and what is sent to the commissioners, and I think that's generally true. I don't think the staff does anything but provide a scrivener who writes down what's happened, and then the boards approve it, and then that message, whatever it may be, is passed on to the commissioners.
Bob, do all minutes of every advisory board and every function in that area go to the township manager too? Does he receive a copy too prior,
Yes.
or at the same time the commissioners do?
Well, he receives them really when they are typed up, and then they have to go back to the next meeting of the particular board and be approved, and then after they're approved, they're forwarded to the commissioners.
Fine.
But the township manager does, I doubt that he could read them all, but he does have access to them from every board.
So he knows what's
on a
going
monthly
on.
or every other month basis whenever the boards meet. Not all the boards meet every month.
I have a question, and it's pertaining to the library board. Now that it has been changed to an advisory board, who will do the hiring and firing of the staff?
The township manager. The librarian or head librarian will now be called the director of library, of the library, and will be hired and under the supervision of the manager, just as the director of community development is, or the chief of police is.
Well, there's more than one librarian. I take it that the manager would hire all staff
That's
within
right.
the library.
That's right.
Yeah.
The librarian, just as the Parks and Recreations director, Kyle Robinson, or any department head will recommend who should be hired, but it is the manager who, again, under the code, hires and fires all employees.
I guess somehow a lot of people get library becomes sacred. The books are sacred, and there is concern that someone will take books off the shelves. Someone will. I don't know whether it's the freedom of the people to have what's in the library. I think that happens to be a concern, and I take it that the library board will continue to supervise some of the materials that are in the library, or am I wrong?
Well, certainly the library board, as we pass the new legislation, that would be its primary function. And its primary function, to correctly put this, I think, Pat, as my wife, who's a librarian, would say, is to concentrate on media. Media is not necessarily books. It involves many other things. And in fact, I believe that the manager and the officials in the township, and I'm not speaking for them, but I think and I believe this, it is their hope that the library board will concentrate on making available to the citizens of Upper St. Clair the best media they can. And the reason for the change is that will free them from concentrating whether to buy blue pencils or orange pencils, and where to buy the pencils, which the township's professional staff can do much better than the library board. So again, we're getting the library department separated so that hopefully it will concentrate on media, And for example, it may concentrate on having a private library drive to raise $500,000 to build a new library in 1990. I mean, that's the kind of thing which I think the township would like the library board to concentrate on, rather than deciding whether a part-time librarian gets 3 days vacation or 4 days vacation, which will now be handled by the manager.
So all this now is an arm of the township.
That's correct.
They now fall right in with the rest of the employees, am I right?
That's correct. There's only one exception to that. That's the private funds raised through the library by friends of the library will still be under the control of the library board as trustees. And they will act as trustees for the trust of that separate money, which is provided by private citizens, either through bequests or drives, their yearly drive, and they will determine as trustees the use of that money.
Okay. Well, I think as the newest arm of the township that we needed to explore that particular department, and because I think there are a lot of questions raised, and I hope we'll can
Sure,
answer
there's
some.
been a strong tradition there of having a separate library board, and when any change is made, you know, there are always questions.
Well, it's been an excellent library, and we will assume that it will continue to grow in the same vein.
Well, I think that's up to the citizens. We're a citizens' government, just like the United States, and if the citizens speak that they want a strong library, the citizens will get a strong library. And if they speak that they want more tennis courts, then they speak in that way. I think the commissioners listen to the citizens.
It all boils down to lobbying for what you believe
You said
in.
that, Dorothy. I didn't.
Well, Pat, do you have any more questions?
Well, I have loads of them, but I'd
Good.
like to save them for another time.
Okay. This concludes the second in our series of the law and local government. Next time, our topic will be township fiscal matters. If you have program suggestions for the League of Women Voters community information programming, please write League of Women Voters, 171 Boxfield Road, Pittsburgh 15241. We'd like to hear from you. For the League of Women Voters, I'm Dottie Kay, Chair, and I'd like to thank Bob Hackett for his presentation today and Pat Hyde for joining with us.